Cities are defined by their cultures. Those cultures could entail sports or business or certainly arts and entertainment. Oklahoma City is thriving in all of these areas. But who makes that all happen? This Town OKC explores the people behind the cultures, their origins, their motivations, their challenges, and their dreams. I'm Rick Allen Lippert. I've been in this town for over 50 years with a front row seat to seeing the culture grow from a dusty bus stop on the Southern Plains to a flourishing destination. Join me as we meet the folks behind the culture on This Town OKC. Shoshana Wasserman, thank you. It is a pleasure to have you here and to see you again. Oh my goodness, how many years ago did we first meet?
Well, we won't say, but a long time. Yeah.
A long time.
Yeah.
And that was at City Art Center.
Mm-hmm. City Art Center and Oklahoma Children's Theater, and I was the PR director there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I was on the board of Children's Theater for a while, back in the 80s.
Yeah, I was going to say, it was probably 89, 88.
I've been a fan of yours, and I know you're the deputy director, right, of
Correct.
the First American Museum.
Yes.
And I think that is such a brilliant name so that you can call it the FAM.
Right, right.
I mean, all of the justification for how that name came about, I think, is absolutely brilliant. We will get to the FAM in a little bit.
Okay.
But since this is an oral history on you, young lady, where are you from?
Well, I was born in Norman, Oklahoma. And then shortly after that, my parents and I moved back to New York. My dad was from New York, my mom from here. They met at University of Oklahoma. My uncle Chabon Dakin played football at OU, so lots of ties there.
Okay.
Then we moved back to New York. We lived there for about 3 years, and then we come back to Oklahoma. And then I was pretty much born and raised here in Oklahoma City.
So how old were you when you spent your years in New York?
Probably until I was about 3,
Okay.
4.
So no real memories to speak of.
Right.
Okay. So effectively, you've been in Norman your whole life.
Well, not Norman, in Oklahoma City. I was born in Norman.
Yeah, right.
But I'm an Oklahoma City gal.
There you go. All right. Where'd you go to school?
Well, I graduated from Putnam City Original,
Okay.
and then
You're a pirate then, right?
I was a pirate, yeah. And then I felt like it was my personal responsibility to test out every university almost in the state. So my first year I went to Cameron University.
Attended Cameron.
Okay. For a year in Lawton, Oklahoma. And there was a gentleman by the name of James Curtin who was an amazing playwright, and he would go around to different schools and kind of establish theater and performing arts programs. And then once he got them up and running, then he would move on. So I had the great privilege and opportunity to be a part of, that era that he was there. And then I came back. I went to OCU, went to what was then called Central State University, now
Yes.
UCO.
I went there.
Yep. And then OCCC and Rose State for a hot minute.
So let me read between the lines here. You were not a good student and flunked out of every school you ever went to.
No, I am a absolute derivative of a teaching that my mom shared with me when I was very young. And she said, life is a process of elimination. Try as much as you can.
Okay. So something about each of these places didn't quite fit, and so you went to greener pastures.
Yeah. And so,
Okay.
and
That's better than the other way around.
yeah, and interestingly, every time I changed universities, I changed majors. So I tried all kinds of stuff, ultimately wound up graduating from the University of Oklahoma with a degree in education. So I have a BS in education, and then went on to get my master's degree in organizational development and multicultural, business education. So yeah, a wild and varied history.
I'll say, yeah.
And before you and I met, when I was at City Art Center and Oklahoma Children's Theater, I had spent 12 years working with really Oklahoma tourism. I had my own Native American dance company with another gentleman, Dennis Zotai, and we were traveling all over the state, all over the world, and really promoting Oklahoma in all of these different travel markets. But there wasn't a product. There was such a fascination in German-speaking Europe for Native culture.
Right.
But then what the problem is when they would get here in Oklahoma, there wasn't a way to navigate the experiences.
Right.
So
There was no destination.
No, and that really sparked an interest in me during that time period. And so then I had been watching this project begin to take shape and develop. At that time, Native American Cultural and Educational Authority. Gina Timberman, Tommy Thompson, they were at the helm at that time. And dear friend of our family and one of my mentors, Enoch Kelly Haney, former Seminole chief.
Yes.
And former, state legislature. He was the appropriation chair at the time. And that's really how this museum, really took hold, got its legs, got the original funding. And he was one of those individuals. He and his father, Woodrow Haney, famous flute player, artist, and my grandfather, Sandy Dakin, were good friends. And they both spoke the language. So I can remember as a young girl going to Woodrow's house and hearing my grandfather and his father speak the Muskogee language, and we'd be there all afternoon. I look back at that now, and that's such a privilege, and it just really shaped so much of my, kind of worldview. And then later on, here I am working for Governor Anatobi, Enoch Kelly Haney. And so you talk about a real full circle moment. That was really something.
How fascinating. He was a great guy. I really liked him. There was one summer when I was running the Oklahoma Film Institute at OCCC, and he came in as a student and studied film for a couple weeks. And he was a fun guy to hang with.
Yeah, he just really had this amazing ability to move in between different worlds, really. He was a native language speaker first. He, of course, world-renowned artist, but then just an exceptional mind and an exceptional human being who really wanted good for all people. And so his political career, he was the predecessor to so many people now.
Yeah. Well, and if he had only one accolade, it would be the Guardian on top of the Capitol. I mean, what a sculpture that is. That we got to see it. My wife and I got to see it up close when it was on the ground.
Yes.
Before they lifted it.
Me too.
We made a point of going up there and getting as close to it as we would never be able to again. And
right.
It was truly, I don't use this word very often at all. It truly was awesome.
Yeah, right. And I remember, from early years, he would always say, don't be afraid to dream big. And that's powerful.
It is.
And in our, early days of, the museum and ups and downs and twists and turns, he and so many others, really were steadfast in staying committed to a world-class vision. There were a lot of times that this museum could have been carved up into a lot of baby pieces and projects, and it wouldn't be anything like what it is today. But there was always this master plan and this vision, and he and so many others, just really held to that vision.
So am I hearing you say that Enoch Kelly Haney was really the visionary behind the First Americans Museum?
Well, I would say there were many. You know,
Okay.
this, as I mentioned, you know, even when I was traveling with tourism, there were so many people for going back all the way to the 60s to when my mom was at OU. There was a group of Native students then, you know, and they were all imagining a place, a
Okay.
central place where Native peoples could come together and you know, fellowship with each other, but also where the world could learn about all of these different cultures in one state. That's such a unique thing. So I think this has been an idea and a concept by so many, and there have been a lot of different hands
Okay.
that have touched this at different times. So I would say he was one of the instrumental ones because when it really took its footing as a state entity, he was the appropriation chair, he and the late Senator Kerr, and they authored the first bill
Okay.
to create a state agency. But, you know, Governor Anatoby, Greg Wadley, Ken Ferguson, I mean, those were some of the people that were part of the board, and there's so many more. I would miss names. And then there were so many people, you know, in the Native community. I actually remember being at City Arts Center and Oklahoma Children's Theater when they first were doing the initial interviews, and they were going all throughout Indian country, and they were interviewing different Native peoples about what everybody thought this place should be someday. And I was actually one of the people they interviewed when I was working there, me and so many others. And it's really interesting. Lord Cultural Resources was hired at that time to kind of put together develop the conceptual framework, and Ralph Applebaum and Associates and Johnson Fain, Hornbeak Blatt, the architects. And that was such a unique thing because they all sort of came on together. And so the whole museum, the program plan for the building, the thinking behind the exhibitions about what would take place in such a place, it was all sort of being formulated holistically. And that was really unique for that time when you think about it. That was 1994 was when the legislation was
Wow. That was
passed. And
30.
it wasn't until, I think, 2005 when the first funding was realized. Wow. So, you know,
I know it took a
Kelly's-
while, and I don't want to get into the controversy of why it took so long.
Well, big projects, you know, if you look around the world,
Sure.
big projects take big thinking. And like he said, don't be afraid to dream big, but then you have to be willing to stay the course and
Exactly.
and just really do all the things to, you know, make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I on a much smaller scale, can just point around here to where we are at Carpenter Square Theater. We're currently sitting in the rehearsal studio, but as I just showed you, around the place, this was an empty warehouse in June of 2019, and it took 4 years, one step forward, 3 steps back, but we finally opened. Like I said, much smaller scale than the FAM.
But similar story. And now I look back retrospectively and I can, you know, so many different legislative sessions where we would be so close to passing, you know, the funding mechanism to finish it, and it wouldn't happen, and the disappointment, and, you know, kind of going through that. But now I look back at when we opened in September of 2021, and it was the right time. You know, sometimes another one of my mentors and somebody who was very much a part of the thinking and guiding of this museum was Dr. Henrietta Mann. And she would always say, you know, things have a certain life cycle of their own. And sometimes we think we can, you know, plan and set goals and chart the path. But sometimes the Creator has a different path for things.
Right.
And I look at September 2021, and that was the right time for this museum there's so much going on in the city now.
Right.
We look around and with the new arena coming and just all the different things. So it was the right timing. Even though I came on with the project October 1st of 2005, and then we had the ground blessing ceremony November 1st of 2005, and then it wouldn't be until 2021
Yeah.
until we actually open it. But there were things that had to take place and happen, and all in their own life cycle. And so, as we get older, you and I can look at things with a little bit of a different lens.
Exactly. Yeah. And appreciate the journey.
Right.
Because we know what it took to get to the end.
Yeah.
Whenever it does get to the end. So as deputy director, what does that entail?
Well, it's a lot of things, and it's been a lot of different things through the year. I came on as a program planning consultant originally to look at not only the building programming and what would occur where within the architectural structure, but also look at programming from a, like museum programming perspective. And we piloted a lot of different kinds of projects with the Science Museum, with the Oklahoma City Museum of Art. We did all kinds of things in 2007 to, I'd say about 2011. So that was an interesting period and learned so much. And in fact, when I came on with this museum project, there wasn't even an office for me. Tommy Thompson and Gina were over at the Oklahoma Department of Commerce. And so they actually put my office with ADG Blatt, which was the owner's representative, and they're an architectural firm.
Right.
But in retrospect, I see, wow, the design of all of that, because I learned so much about construction. I didn't know anything about that world.
Right.
But I had a front row seat to all of that, and that has really served me well in the project. And then, I spent a lot of time working with the marketing as a part of my role with the museum and going through that rebranding that you were talking about.
Right.
We were originally Native American Cultural Authority, the American Indian Cultural Center and Museum. None of those just rolled off the tongue.
Exactly.
And then when we knew we had this moment in, I think that was 2018. I could have the year wrong, where, okay, we're going to really come out of the gate, and this is what we'll be known
Right.
for forevermore. And we worked with an amazing firm, Branding Navigation, and that's when we were like First Americans Museum. There was a rich tradition in Canada of First Nations,
Right.
referring to themselves. And there's a number of different, studies that we, did and whatnot. And ultimately, we wanted to reestablish this understanding that we are the first peoples of this continent.
Yes.
And even though many of our 39 tribes that are here in Oklahoma today come from other places, myself included,
Right.
I'm Muskogee Creek, and my people, I'm specifically from Flaco Tribal Town, and my people were from Alabama and Georgia, two different removal routes to find ourselves here in Indian Territory. My grandfather, Sandy Dakin, helped reestablish our tribal town near Okemah. And so we really understood how important it was to show that we have always been here. This has always been Indian country.
Right.
There were tribes, the Wichita and affiliated tribes, the Caddos, the Apaches, Tonkawas. They've always called this place home. And so it just really resonated to be able to use that First Americans with the museum. But what we really loved is the acronym it created.
Exactly.
Because FAM really embraces this idea of family, and it embraces this understanding of welcoming all people. And so that was really important to us because we never wanted it to feel like a museum that was for them.
Right.
Because it's for everyone. Our First Americans history is all of our shared history
Right.
in this place, the Americas.
Yeah.
So that was really, a profound moment. So I was really lucky to be a part of two different branding initiatives, and finally that one. And then ultimately landing in the role of deputy director. I've worked with 6 different museum directors here at the museum, which has been delightful to just be a part of each one of their visions and each one of their moments in the museum. And so my role today, I've been a part of curatorial process of all of the exhibits at one time or another. But my role also has been, to sort of support that executive director or CEO's role. It's also been to really look at the day-to-day operations. Right now, I'm, really responsible for a lot of the day-to-day operations in facility management, custodial, the store, where we support all of these native artisans and
Right.
keep these native artists in
Right.
Oklahoma so that there's a thriving arts marketplace here instead of watching all of our artists flee to, Santa Fe and the different places. So that's really exciting. Guest services, that real hospitality part of the museum that welcomes all of our visitors, and that's where you get your tickets. And also what I'm so proud of is I've spent the last 7 years co-curating the new Family Discovery Center. That was one piece that we didn't get to finish before the grand opening in September 2021. As you
Okay.
know, COVID hit.
Right.
And we had to divert a lot of funds that were originally designated for that exhibit towards finishing some of the other exhibits. The museum did not originally have a full-service restaurant as part of its plan.
Really?
So in 2017, we reprogrammed some of the architecture and the building to make sure we could have a full-service restaurant. How can you experience cultures without experiencing the food?
Exactly. And I will say that Gwen and I have enjoyed a Valentine's Day dinner there at 39, and loved the Three Sisters.
Yes, yeah. So, yeah, I've had the real fortune and opportunity to be a different part of a lot of different moments in the museum's
I would
development.
imagine you also, and I don't expect you to toot this part of your horn. I would imagine you provide a wealth of institutional knowledge about the place. Because as you said, you've been through, 6 executive directors, CEOs, and yet here you still are. So you can tell them how it's been.
Well, and more importantly, there were so many people. There were so many people that were advisors to the project, so many that are gone now. I mean, I can go through the names, and I had the great opportunity to understand their aspirations for the project, what they hoped and what they intended. And, and that's, it's almost our native histories are such a oral history.
Right.
And I think that's the part that I love so much, is kind of help to carry forward some of those stories, some of those hopes, dreams, aspirations. And just last week, was the winter solstice.
Yes.
And I was standing out there, and we were, getting ready to witness the winter solstice happen. And a gentleman by the name of Ted Isham, who is Muskogee, and he was part of this museum development from its earliest days. And he and I were standing there watching it together. And I said, what does it feel like for you to stand here after all these years, having been a part of shaping not only the architecture, but some of the concepts that guide the whole museum philosophy, the exhibits and whatnot. And as he just began to share stories about the different moments and different things and how rewarding it was for him to see the remnants and elements of many of those early
Yes.
discussions, being memorialized, being celebrated, but in new and different ways.
Yes.
Always fresh, always, with new approaches. So not just trying to leave it in some kind of a historical past, but to remember its underpinnings. And that's what I love is right now we went in the last year from 40 employees to 146.
Wow.
We've got young people with creative new minds and new ideas and new energies, bringing all of that excitement and enthusiasm, to a lot of hopes and dreams.
That's
so
just
that's
fantastic.
exciting.
Okay, I'm going to come back to hopes and dreams and aspirations in a moment. Since you mentioned the solstice and watching it through the mound, I don't know what you call it, the mound?
Yeah.
Okay. Years ago, before the FAM opened, I think before the FAM even was being built, the mound was there. And I remember asking someone, it may have been you, who knows, if there were going to be plans to watch solstice and we were told no plans. And I thought, oh, what a disappointment that is, because that looks like what it's built for.
Well, I don't know who you got that information from because it was always planned.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to know that somebody didn't know what they were talking about. And then last summer, my wife and I decided we're going to go down but apparently we waited until way too late, and there was no way we were ever going to find a parking spot.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they were parked all the way out to Eastern.
Right.
It was, it's still a dream of mine to witness the solstice through the mound, because obviously that's what it was built for.
Right. So, it's interesting. That whole area, we call it the Festival Plaza.
Yes.
The FAM Mound encircles our Festival Plaza. And this is something we have, being from, my ancestors were part of the Mississippian mound cultures. And, spiral mounds.
Right.
That's why you see this mound at the museum, is we here in Oklahoma have spiral mounds, one of the most significant archaeological sites in all of North America. I don't know whether people really realize that in Lafleur County. And these mound communities, they were made up of multiple mounds, not just one singular large mound, but multiple mounds. And each of the mounds had different purposes. Some were for funerary, some materials, some were for religious purposes. Some were literally, they were built around a centralized plaza, just like you would see a fort, if you will, to protect the people. And so going back to Ted Isham and many of the early people that were formulating the idea, one of the central core things that they said is we want to do what we've always done for thousands of years, and that is align the entire museum with the cardinal directions. So that is why we are able to witness the winter solstice through the tunnel, the summer solstice over the top of the mound, and then if you stand in that same place within the Festival Plaza and you look back to the east through the remembrance walls as you make your way into the museum, we witness the sun rise at the time of vernal and autumnal equinox. And that was fully conceptualized.
Good.
Because we've done that. And so these are not made up things. These are things that these early people like Ducky Ann Q, like Dr. Blue Clark, like Dr. Henrietta Mann, so many, many other people, it was important to them to make sure these things had a place. Even the big Hall of the People that everybody drives by,
right.
When you drive by on I-35 or I-40 and you see this big, glass structure that looks maybe a little bit like the curvature of an eye,
Right.
It is taking its inspiration from a Wichita Grass Lodge. And the reason that we instructed the architects to make this big, bold move is to remind people that the Wichita and affiliated tribes always called this place home. They had encampments all up and down the river there. And so, it's a large move to make sure people remember this has always been Indian country.
Yeah.
So lots of little things like that just, have these beautiful moments in both the architecture and the exhibit.
Okay, let's get back to hopes, dreams, and aspirations. Going back into your younger years that you were talking about, folks talking about the idea of having a gathering place, did you have any other dreams or aspirations that you were working on personally?
Well, when I graduated from the University of Oklahoma with my degree in education and specifically multicultural education, that's where I really thought I would land, honestly. And I did that for a long time with the dance company. And in fact, our main, livelihood was going into schools. And we designed these programs where we would go into the schools, we would present, ideas and understanding, a little bit of what we consider now a little bit like edutainment, where we would have the school assembly and we would all come together and we would dispel some of the stereotypes and
Good.
we would get the kids activated. And that was a large part of what I thought I would be doing. And then when I began to see traveling worldwide, the fierce interest, whether we were in the Asian market or German-speaking Europe or anywhere in the world, what they really wanted were authentic experiences here in the United States. And you always have those visitors that come from other places and they go to each coast because, that's what you
Right.
do. And but then there's that niche visitor who has been to each coast and then they want that real authentic American experience. Well, what is that? That is Western culture and that is Native culture. And that's when I began to really understand we have something really special here that you just wouldn't get anywhere else in the country. 39 distinct nations all in one land base in such close proximity, from Oklahoma City, you can drive anywhere from 30 minutes to 3.5 hours, and you can go to each of the tribal headquarters.
Right.
That's really unusual. All of the 12 different linguistic families. If you were to travel all over Europe, you would not experience as many different cultural groups as you do right here in the state of Oklahoma. So I really began to understand how powerful that was. And like I said, the dance company, we were working with tourism a lot, but there was nothing for people to come here and really do. They were coming, they were going to Anadarko, to Indian City.
Right.
They were coming, they were going to these one-off kinds of places, but it wasn't manageable. And so at that time, then I had I always loved art, and whether it was visual arts or performing arts. So I had, 12 wonderful years with City Art Center and Oklahoma Children's Theater. Of course, City Art Center went on to become Oklahoma Contemporary, and
Right.
Oklahoma Children's Theater still exists today. And that performing arts, I really began to understand what does it mean to create a unique visitor experience? And so that was all really formative. So I think by the time what we now know as the First Americans Museum was coming to fruition, and when I had the great opportunity to come aboard in 2005, that really sort of combined so many of those different aspirations that I had in different areas for arts, culture, inclusivity. I'm somebody who's really interested. I mean, my own background, my father is Jewish, my mother is Native American. Really, if you were to look at me, I shouldn't be here. My father's family all fled the Holocaust.
Right.
And
Pardon me for laughing, but that concept of I shouldn't be here.
yeah, I really should not be here because they came in on Ellis Island and thrived in New York and went on to have productive lives. Same thing on my mom's side. From, my grandparents and great-great-grandparents in Alabama and Georgia and through the multiple removals to Indian Territory, many didn't
Right.
survive.
So many.
So the fact that I am here comes with great gratitude and great responsibility, I
I'm
think.
just thinking responsibility.
Yeah.
That sense of responsibility must be sometimes probably burdensome.
Well, yeah, but along with that is being able to bring who gets to be a part of something from birth, really pre-birth, from conceptualization to breaking ground to laying 50 feet down into bedrock, the piers that would support an institution, to the building of the architecture, to the building of the museum programming, to the building of the organizational culture. I mean, what an honor
No kidding.
and what a blessing.
No
Yeah.
kidding. So it seems like a no-brainer that you are where you're supposed to be, doing what you're supposed to be doing. It seems like, duh, of course, Shoshana is doing this. But was there a time when it looked like you weren't going to get hired at the cultural center, whatever it was called at the time?
Well, it is interesting because at the time when they were asking me to come and be a part of it, there really wasn't a mechanism in place yet. And so the powers that be at the time had to get very creative in figuring out a way to bring it to fruition because they weren't ready. There were 3 employees at the time. Tommy Thompson was the executive director, Gina Timberman was the deputy director, and Veronica Simon was the executive assistant. But there really wasn't the capacity for more employees at the time. And yet here we were getting ready for a ground blessing, and there was tremendous need to put energy into the...
And no office space for you.
Right, and no office space. Yeah, then there's that. And so, but that was an interesting process because we began conversations, and it took several months to even figure out a way to make it all happen. And so, yeah, I would say during that period, it was like, is this going to happen or isn't it? Yes. So there were those moments. And then there were certainly moments later on in the museum, all from 2005 all the way up to 2021, where it would be, are we going to have a job? Are we not? Is it going to happen? Isn't it? So I think all of that, it really deepens your understanding of, like I said, there's a life force. And I think, I came on in 2005, and that was really the first time that the whole community had come together on the site, native and non-native. But certainly it was the first time all 39 tribes had ever come together in unison to do something so significant like that. And
well, that in itself is pretty remarkable.
It was nothing short of a miracle, actually.
I can imagine there being a little bit of friction from time to time between this tribe or that tribe.
Lots of different ideas, lots of different ways it could be done.
Right.
But I do remember this. There was such a beautiful plan for that day. It began before sunrise. We all went out to the site. And it just so happened I had nothing to do with that, but the Muskogee people were asked to come and light a new fire that day on the land base, and that comes with responsibilities, and there was things that they had to do and take care of it during that day. And so we did that, and so we began the whole morning with a stomp dance, which is traditional to our people. And even though it wasn't a ceremonial stomp dance, it was more of a social. We were doing this before daybreak, and as the city was beginning to wake up, and now cars are starting to pass on I-35 and I-40, excuse me, and you're beginning to see all the downtown wake up, and here we are stomp dancing.
Right.
Out on the land. And it was this juxtaposition that was pretty profound. Then there was the big afternoon celebration over at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum with Rotary, and that was, a big moment when a lot of different entities from the city were coming together. And then that evening we came to the site, and that's when we had all kinds of programming all afternoon. And then that evening we had the ground blessing ceremony. And at this one particular moment, we had seated around kind of a circular arena all of the tribes. And each of the tribal, it was either the tribal leader, be it the chairman or governor or president, or they could designate, if it was a spiritual leader or a tribal princess, whoever they wanted. And there was a hickory stick under everybody's chair. And at one time in unison, everybody moved toward the center of that fire and fed the fire together.
Oh,
And that was profound.
I'll bet.
And I believe it really called on all of our ancestors to come together and protect this museum for all these many years. And I've always looked back at that moment and had the knowingness and the gratitude to both Tommy Thompson and Gina Timberman, because that was really their vision. And I was lucky enough to be a part of that moment. But I know that it was so profound, and it really set something in motion to care for this special land base, this special thing that would be created.
Right.
And I believe that is what has kept it safe.
Did you ever have a plan B?
I probably spent from 2005. People used to always ask, what did you do all those years when the museum wasn't open? And I'm not going to go into sort of details.
Right.
But I never knew at the time that part of what I was coming to do was political strategy. And part of that, because it was a state project, city project, private project, it was so many different things. There was a lot of maneuvering. There was a lot of negotiating. There was a lot of political finesse. There were a lot of people that were, I'm not taking credit for that. There were many people that had great knowledge and great understanding, but I had the great opportunity to support a lot of those initiatives. And so we did nothing from 2005 to 2015, where it really got back on track with a brief shutdown in 2012. But plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, what if this, what if that, And with each one of those plans comes full strategy, there was so much planning that had to be done over and over again as the realities would change with each legislative session, with each moment in time, whether even beyond when it was just a state project, when it was, really that city-state initiative, private sector initiative. And so I really learned so much during those years about flexibility, about coming up with different plans, thinking out different scenarios. We have, amongst Native peoples, we have this idea of making decisions for 7 generations ahead. And there was a lot of those moments interlaced, if you will, into what we see today. And many will never know that, all those different plans.
Sure.
But the one thing I admire, I appreciate, and what all Oklahomans should appreciate is that the board of directors, led by those people that I mentioned before, Governor Anna Tubby, Greg Wadley, Ken Ferguson, Chief Haney, Dr. Mann, Terry Mason Moore. I'm gonna miss people. Chief Sparkman. So many different people at different times. Is they continued to say, we are not going to carve this up. We are not going to. We have a master plan. We will wait it out until everything is in the right place and we can bring it to fruition. There was always a plan for there to be the museum, an outdoor cultural park, all of these different components. And they really stayed true to that vision, and I admire that so much. Which then, for me, with the Family Discovery Center, because that was really, I had the great opportunity to be given the opportunity to developed the Family Discovery Center with another individual who's been a part of the museum for many years, Kimberly Rodriguez. And that took 7 years.
Right.
And there were a lot of moments during that process where
Sure.
there were those who wanted to carve it up into different bits and pieces or shave it down to this or that or the other. And again, the board of directors said, no, we're going to see it through to its fruition, to what we originally envisioned it as. And so I think if there's anything that I would impart to people about this museum's story, it goes back to what Enoch Kelly Haney shared with me. Don't be afraid to dream big, but know that with dreaming big comes great responsibility. Sometimes it comes with a lot of, you have to alter plans. You have to be ready to, change gears, change lanes, but keep the original vision intact, the original aspiration, the original goal. You can change lots of things about it, but whatever it was originally intended to do. Today, when we originally thought about the Family Discovery Center, we imagined it to be a giant pop-up book. When
Okay.
I was young, I loved a pop-up book.
Sure.
You open
Yeah.
the pages, the story popped up into life, and you were instantly engaged in the story. It's a little bit of theater, it's a little bit of performance art, right? And so that's what we set out to do. We wanted people to open the doors, and they landed in the middle of a giant pop-up book. That got challenged along the way many times.
I'm sure.
And there were many who wanted to do things different ways, of course, always about funding. And we just stuck to the course. It took longer, and we had to protect the dream. We had to protect the vision. It was always about values. It was always about these values of the whole Family Discovery Center is all about we're all connected. The same as the branding, right?
Yeah.
And it was about community, respect, resilience, and stewardship. It was really funny because when we finally opened the Family Discovery Center this year in September at the 4-year anniversary of the museum's opening, all of those values had a story all of their own with just the Family Discovery Center. We had to form community. We had to not just form community of people who would believe in it, people who would fund it. We had to form a mutual respect between community partners, between tribal partners, to allow some of what is experienced in there. Resilience. We have a whole coyote's den that reminds us that we sometimes have to stop and take a breath, because when life throws us lemons, we've got to figure out how to make lemonade. And so sometimes that means slowing down. Maybe not, it didn't get done in the pacing that we expected, but to do it right, we had to take a breath and take a pause and hold the line, hold the course. Stewardship, that's another one of the values in there. And it doesn't necessarily just mean stewardship as we know it today as far as philanthropy. We have to be good stewards of Mother Earth.
Right.
We have to be, each one of us has been given special gifts by the Creator. We have one exhibit in there called Tree Trunk Transporter. And you step inside this tree and you meet some of these incredible Native role models. You meet Wilma Mankiller. You meet Commander John Harrington. You meet Aragon Starr. You meet Joy Harjo. And we learn their stories in a graphic novel, fun experience. And then you get to have your photo taken with this role model. And the whole purpose of that photo, well, of course, we all have to have selfies these days, but if you look at each one of those selfies, you are standing just behind the role model, following in their footsteps. And so you get this wonderful keepsake, but it also reminds us that each one of us has special gifts. Not a one of those people was any more important or special than you or I or anybody else. And we have to all work to become good role models. So all of those things found their way in the Family Discovery Center, and some of that was because of the long journey. And so, I think that is part of the museum story.
Shoshana, this has been fascinating, and our time is running out. Although there's no set limit to how long a podcast can be, there is a limit to how long I think it ought to be. Thank you so much. This has been a fascinating story. I truly do believe you are the right person, have been the right person to be in that spot, to see the fam from its conception to its realization.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to come and visit with you, and it's wonderful to see an old friend.
Yeah. This has been This Town OKC, sponsored by Carpenter Square Theater, edited by Fred O. Bishop. I'm Rick Allen Lippert. This is a Lippert Media production.